is giving 48 hours notice, which is not even in the Act, which was a misleading statement made in the government press release. It's not in the Act. But is 48 hours notice going to help Nova Scotia consumers? Is Bill 79 an answer to give Nova Scotians immediate relief? It clearly isn't. Could the government have done more? There is no doubt. Could the government be doing more now by sitting immediately with representatives of the parties now, rather than waiting for a select committee? Bring in Dave Collins, bring in industry reps, bring in consumer groups, bring in whoever you have to as experts. We thought that was going on for the last 3 months. Nova Scotians thought that's what they were doing. What else would they be doing since January, when the Premier said they were working on a plan? We all expected that's what was taking place. Every time someone gassed up and was saying the price is so high, but I know the Premier's made a commitment, he's got a plan that's going to address this. Yesterday, May the 13th, 2004, was clear proof that they did not have a plan. What we've seen in this bill is regulations, regulations, regulations. This government, once again, has failed to recognize this is a minority government. The days of doing legislation through regulation are over for as long as minority government lives. And I know that the finance critic for the NDP has clearly spoken his opposition to continually having acts governed by regulation. So together we can work at going through this bill, if they are intent on supporting it, to make sure that as much as we can, we reinforce that act and put in everything we can to make sure that Nova Scotians can see this is being done and do not have to rely upon the government to turn around and decide, rather than 48 hours, let's make it 4 hours, let's make it 72 hours. Right now, the Act would allow those variances to take place. Nova Scotians should at least have an Act which says what the government indicated that the Act was intended to do. This is an extremely frustrating situation, Mr. Speaker. It's frustrating for us because we're consumers. It's frustrating for the people we represent. It's frustrating for low-income earners who have a hard time affording a vehicle to start off with. Seniors whose vehicle is sometimes their last chance at independence, living on a fixed income, to see such an increase. Nova Scotians are accustomed to prices in the range of 60 cents, 70 cents at its highest. To now see that 96.9, that is beyond the reach for many Nova Scotians. To have to tell them in this House today that we like the government plan, that would not bring them any suggestions for solution till August 31st, I think is a failure on our part. That is why our caucus has said it's not good enough. We expect more. The government could have done more. And I do hope that with time and upon reflection, that the NDP caucus and their leader will also come to that realization, that together we should demand better from the government, that together we should force their feet to the fire, and at the end of the day, we should all work for the protection of Nova Scotia consumers. That is why they sent us here, and to do anything less would be a failure on all of our parts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member. Recognize the honourable member for Hants East.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it really wasn't my intention to speak to this bill, but I'm not sure if I can let the honourable member get away with everything that he had to say. Mr. Speaker, does this bill go far enough? Absolutely not. You heard the member for Halifax Fairview, our finance critic. We would have liked to see the government move on attacking the high price based on attacking the HST. This would be really the only concrete way, and the member from Richmond keeps saying, well, what's the NDP plan? Well, if you had been listening and paying attention to something sensible is a gift he doesn't have. So I want to say that he... And I was glad to hear him mention seniors on fixed income and the impact of high gasoline prices has on them, but he failed to recognize that when it came to seniors going into nursing homes and supporting the budget that actually would have alleviated the taking of money, choose my words carefully, every last cent of seniors that his previous government initiated, but they didn't have the intestinal fortitude to stand up and support the budget to prevent that, but yet he'll wail on about gasoline prices and the effects on seniors. So, is this good enough? No, it's not good enough. it's a start. The only thing that I had a friend and someone who's been running a gas station for 40 years made the comment to me last night that at least with this, people won't blame him. And that was something that he felt, that they were always being blamed by the high prices. I think he told me it was about $40,000 or $45,000 for a tanker of gasoline that comes to his station. And he felt that they were always the ones who bore the brunt of the high price, that the public attacked them. And he felt, at least in this way, that maybe the public would see who actually was the problem and that it wasn't them. But, Mr. Speaker, I think when I don't know if this select committee will come up with anything that'll be useful. If they don't come up with any more or pay attention anymore to what they come up with in the beef task force, then it probably is going to be a waste of time. If the government actually intends to do something, and I hope they'll show their goodwill by acting on the recommendations, whatever come forward from their committee, and I'm not overly optimistic. I think there are ways that they could attack this, and I think HST would be the best one, and they know that today. So if they want to go down this road, I'm willing to see that, give them a chance to see if they can come up with something that will work. But I want them to know that when this process is done, and there are good alternatives offered by this committee, and this government does not follow any good advice, that they are going to hear from me on it, and they're going to hear from Nova Scotians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I recognize the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Speaker. I want to say a few words on Bill number 79, Petroleum Products Pricing Act. Mr. Speaker, yesterday when the government announced that they will give Nova Scotians a 2-day notice when fuel prices are going up and appoint an all-party select committee to look at fuel prices in Nova Scotia, I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, there were lots of people in this province that were extremely, extremely disappointed. This government has certainly set the stage, has created high expectations. I remember back in January attending a press conference that the Premier was holding. And at that time, the media had asked the Premier if the government was looking at ways in addressing high fuel prices in Nova Scotia. And of course, the Premier indicated to them that yes, his government was in the process. So back in January, the government was in the process of looking at ways, looking at measures that this government would be introducing in order to address high fuel prices in Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, I welcomed the Premier's comments at the time. You know, I was quite pleased, and I know that the Minister of Service Nova Scotia had indicated that at the very same time, that the government was in the process of looking at ways in order to help Nova Scotians with high fuel prices. Mr. Speaker, I think everyone in this House recalls in the last several weeks during question period when questions have been asked to the Premier, to the Minister, at the same time, if the government was looking at addressing these high fuel costs. Again, we were reassured, yes, that government was, and that government would be coming soon with measures in order to help consumers in Nova Scotia. So maybe some of us were probably impatient in waiting to see what the government was going to be tabling or bringing forward, but we knew it was coming. Well, yesterday, Mr. Speaker, 3-4 months later, the expectations were high. High, not just with people from my community, but people throughout this province. People were led to believe that this government was in the process of bringing something forward that would help in terms of taking some actions by the government to help reduce prices at the pumps or fuel prices in Nova Scotia. Well, you know, I look at the minister's remarks yesterday, and I just want to quote one line or one sentence. So it's the first thing that this law will do is stop the surprises. Nova Scotians will have a 2-day notice of a price increase at the pumps. Well, Mr. Speaker, the obvious question is how long did this take for this government to put it together? You know, so for this government to state yesterday that they're now looking at advising consumers in this province will allow you with a 24-hour notice to let you know that next time you're at the gas pumps, prices will be going up, you know, again. You know, Nova Scotians were let down. Nova Scotians were expecting a lot more. We're expecting a lot more. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, that did not happen yesterday. You know, we're going to inform consumers, give them a 24-hour notice. You know, again, and I'm quite sure we haven't heard the end of this, Nova Scotians will certainly be expressing their own personal views on this government's action in coming forward with a 48-hour notice. Mr. Speaker, as well, the government indicated yesterday that they will be appointing an all-party select committee to look at fuel prices in Nova Scotia. So, Mr. Speaker, again, yes, I do welcome the government's announcement yesterday. But, you know, again, looking back at 4 months ago, why the government, why the Premier did not indicate at that time. I don't have all the answers. Our government doesn't have all the answers. But why don't we appoint an all-party select committee of the House and look into high fuel prices in the province? You know, why wait 4 months later? So again, you know, why this delay? Why trying to make believe that this government was going to come forward after having created high expectations with the general public that measures would be announced shortly? Well, again, I think from yesterday's announcement, certainly the government came in short. I think the consumers in Nova Scotia, all consumers in Nova Scotia, were expecting a lot more than just what was reported here. So, Mr. Speaker, some people may actually, and I'm sure that they'll certainly will be providing government and us, members in the opposition, with general feelings, how they feel on this government's announcements from yesterday. A 2-day warning, you know, for gas or diesel or home heating fuel prices increase. You know, I'm sure a lot of people will see this as a joke. Will see this as, you know, a big delay. We'll see this nothing more than trying to delay the real task at hand. So, again, you know, you really have to wonder, again, why more and more Nova Scotians are losing confidence in this Tory government. So, again, yesterday's government's announcement, you know, I'm sure some people this morning are upset, frustrated, after led to believe that this government was seriously looking at some measures in addressing high price fuels in this province. So again, I'm sure we'll be hearing from Nova Scotians with regards to the government's announcements from yesterday. Mr. Speaker, our caucus has indicated earlier that the government should be considering. Should be considering maybe some short-term measures. A couple of the options that our caucus suggested for the government to look at was looking back at rolling back the 2 cents gas increase that this government introduced several years ago. At the same time, to ask these multinational oil companies to come forward and appear behind closed doors in front of the Utility Review Board, so that the government can find out exactly why prices are going up. So at least the government would have an opportunity to hear from these gas companies to justify why these increases are needed. Now, we've been criticized that this is not possible. That this is not possible to roll back this 2 cents a liter on gas. Well, Mr. Speaker, just this week we've heard that gas prices in Cape Breton were at a dollar a liter. So again, we have to recognize, the higher the price, the more money that the government's taking in. So I know that the finance critic from the member from Halifax Fairview indicated, Mr. Speaker, in terms of looking at this before acting upon, this government would be losing some general revenue, and it would be money taken out of programs, taken out of departments. So, of course, that would not be possible. But the member failed to point out to the House, Mr. Speaker, that when prices are as high as they are now, in the high 90s, and in Cape Breton at $1 or over $1, that the provincial government takes in a lot more in revenue. So again, we have to recognize how much more is coming in, and at the same time, if this 2 cents, rolling back this 2 cents would be a possibility. So I think it's not just, this is a terrible idea. I think we did suggest this to the government. I think looking at what the government has proposed yesterday, or has rolled out yesterday, I shouldn't say proposed, they're actually in the process of now going ahead. That's why we're debating this bill here today. So again, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to indicate to the government that I too was extremely disappointed in the government's response yesterday, after having been led to believe for the last 4 months that the government was seriously considering coming forward with some measures that would certainly appease or help consumers in Nova Scotia. And at the end of the day, I'm quite sure, Mr. Speaker, consumers are probably more disappointed in what the government did yesterday than if they had done nothing at all. So again, why this all-party select committee was not put in place a number of months ago, again, the Premier has to answer that question. Again, why give consumers a 48-hour notice when prices will be going up? To me, that certainly is not good enough for this government. And then, looking back at the last 4 months, trying to understand that it took 4 months for this government to act, yesterday, and with these 2 steps, again, it just puzzles me, and I'm sure I'm not the only one puzzled over this government's action. So again, Mr. Speaker, in closing, I'm looking forward, and I'm sure that we haven't heard the end of this 48-hour notice and this all-party committee that will be traveling around the province, hearing what Nova Scotians and consumers have to say with regards to high-priced fuels. I'm sure we'll be hearing lots again. The honourable member from Hants East, just before I had an opportunity to make a few comments on this bill, indicated that he is looking forward to the report from this all-party select committee. And I'm quite sure all members of this House are looking forward to the report, to the recommendations of this all-party committee reporting back. I understand initially it was August 1st. Now I understand it's been delayed till the end of August. So again, to allow this all-party committee to travel the province to hear what the people of Nova Scotia have to say and table a report, and then the government deciding to do absolutely nothing, then I think the government should be quite clear, before this whole process starts, that the government is quite clear that yes, they're looking forward to what this all-party committee will be reporting and providing some possibilities, some recommendations for the government to look at. So I hope that the government is serious into this all-party committee, and yes, that they will be giving special attention to this committee's final recommendations. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity here this morning to say a few words on this bill.
Thank you. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This issue over high-priced gasoline and petroleum products in the province is going to have a very negative effect on our economy. I think long-term, it's going to be very, very serious for business in the manufacturing sector, and more immediately in the tourism industry, where people rely on people traveling, usually by car, to go to a particular destination and stay for a day or two, hopefully, and spend some money. They're going to, even if they do travel, the amount of disposable income they have is going to be drastically reduced because of the high cost of fuel. And if you look in the past, when the fuel costs have gone up, there's been an immediate reduction in tourism, an immediate reduction in the process of vacations that people go through, and definitely an effect on the economy and jobs in the province. So to start this process off, it's very, very obvious that it's going to have a negative impact on the economy in Nova Scotia. The economy has already been hit with the new labor laws, with the Sunday shopping, which has had a very negative effect on businesses. And then we're hit with all kinds of fees in the new budget, before the new budget, that again has hit the economy, and it's going to continue to hit the economy as people realize just how expensive it is to do business in Nova Scotia. That's definitely going to cause a serious problem. Tied in with a 2-cent increase in gas taxes that have been put on before by this government, that has a negative impact on the whole situation. So if you look at the long-term impact of the gas prices, and the fact that taxes add on to these costs and everything else adds on to these costs, and it's going to have a very, very negative impact on Nova Scotians, and that's not good. Just at a time when Nova Scotia's economy is not doing too badly, and hopefully will improve, because the only way people can do well today is if they have a job, and someone without a job really, really doesn't help the economy and is not able to help their family. These sort of things are going to all add up and cause a serious problem. I've got some really serious problems with this bill. I believe that we have to have some kind of controls over the price of fuel in the province to at least give us some stability and know where we're at. I think it's really a joke when you say that the price of fueling, home heating fuel will be advised 2 days in advance. So everybody will call up, try to get the fuel at the old price, and by the time the delivery truck could come there, even if their best efforts, it'll be long past 2 days typically. So really to give 48 hours notice is just really a useless exercise, and it just gives the oil companies just a quicker response to raising prices and go through the thing. And if you look at some of the parts in the Act, it says indeed once you set a fixed wholesale price, no wholesale price shall be higher, but that's fine. No wholesale price higher, that sounds good, that's very positive, but also says it can't be lower. So the oil companies decide for whatever reason they want to reduce the cost of fuel, whatever the fuel is, they can't do it for 48 hours. Instead of being able to allow them to reduce the fuel cost or whatever it is immediately. Because the issue here is the cost. The cost of getting to the consumer is the situation that we have to address. And it appears in this that the way the Act is worded, that you can't reduce, the wholesalers can't reduce the price. And then they talk about a minimum and maximum price that's going to be used. So That also raises some questions. A lot of seems to be a lot of double talk in the Act. Doesn't really address some of the very, very serious issues that go along with this. And then to top it all off, the worst clause in the Act that I've seen, they're going to divide the province up again. They're going to divide it up. Going to have different prices of gasoline in different areas. So the scenario that comes to mind, and this may not be correct, but it's in my mind, is if you live in Yarmouth and the supply of fuel comes in from, say, Dartmouth, or comes through New Brunswick by tanker or by ship or whatever the case may be into Dartmouth or some way, that would mean that the cost of doing business in Yarmouth is going to be higher because your fuel costs are going to be higher. Or in Cape Breton, the cost of fuel is going to be higher. So why not just set a standard rate for the whole province and everybody's on an equal footing? Give the opportunity for rural economic development to grow in this province, which we desperately need so bad. And this government has really done nothing to support or promote rural economic development. And a select committee on prices, well, it's always a good idea to have a select committee of the legislature to review things and get input from the public. I think that's part of, and very important of our democratic process we have here. It's a little bit too late, a whole lot too late to be exact, and it really doesn't do anything today to address a serious problem. One question I'll have for the minister when he has a chance to speak on this, and I'm sure he'll answer this question, if he can. And if he can't answer this question, this whole bill is absolutely useless, and I mean useless. In every business operation, there's a formula used to figure out whether you're going to make money or what your cost should be, and it's pretty standard. It's pretty standard. Now, I can guarantee you the oil companies know right to probably 1/100 of 1% what the formula is on gas pricing. So if the price of crude goes to a certain point, they know exactly what their wholesale price has to be, and also know what the retail price is going to be. That formula is what we need to know, so we can, if and when the government ever comes up with a reasonable bill, not this bill, something that's reasonable, will help control the prices of it, we need to know that formula. Because once we know that formula, you can look at the world price of crude oil and work the formula out and say this is what a reasonable price should be anywhere in Nova Scotia for the fuel. I don't believe that probably the staff and the department or the minister even have any idea what that formula may be, and I would hope that the minister can enlighten me on that, and hopefully he has the information. And if he doesn't have it, make every effort to get it, because I think that's going to be the key to the whole thing here. There's been some success in other areas with working through the public review process, the Public Utilities Review Board in areas, and I think that is a very positive step too. I think that's a process that should go through, as we've been promoting, even behind closed doors, that the oil companies can be protected for their confidential information, to give the information to the government so the government knows exactly where they stand. And it comes back to this formula I'm talking about, the formula that they use to set the prices of fuel. There's other issues here too that I don't see the government doing anything to help. If you look at the price of crude oil, it's been going up and up and up, and fuel costs are going to go up no matter what we do. We can stall them, we can delay them, we can do a lot of things. But I haven't seen the government do anything to support the municipality with transit service that would kick some of the cars off the road during the week and make it easier for people to travel by transit. I've seen no system in place for park and rides. We can take a bus, a rapid transit bus, to the core of the Halifax area. In HRM, this would work very, very well. And the municipality is basically on its own when it comes to do these things, except for funding that comes from the federal government recently. And if you're going to do these things, you've got to look at the broad picture. You've got to look at the cost of fuel. You've got to look at the cost of family. And if you don't make transit a real option for transportation of people to and from work, to and from shopping, or whatever the case may be, it is not going to work. It will not work. I've seen very little efforts here on alternative energy sources. Energy sources such as windmills, there's a few of them planned for the area, some of them coming, but not enough. Other energies such as solar energy. There's no incentive programs for people to make their homes more efficient from the provincial government. None. I remember in the 70s when the energy crisis came and it was It was a big scam at that time. Everybody was going to run out of fuel. There's going to be no more fuel for anybody. We're going to be out in 5 years or 10 years. All of us here probably can remember that. And lo and behold, we didn't run out of fuel. We got lots of fuel. They just wanted a chance to put the price up on the energy again. All kinds of home insulation programs were started. All kinds of alternate energy things were started. And lo and behold, price of fuel went down, stabilized. They found out it was just a scam being put on by who knows who. And all these alternate energy things stopped. They all stopped. There was no emphasis anymore from governments to do this. If these programs would have continued, we wouldn't have such a reliance on the fuel that we need today. And this has got to change. It has to change. We have to have an overall package that makes sure that you don't need to use as much fuel as you do now, plus put some sensible controls, not this act. And every time I see an act, and it's all going to be in regulation, it makes me very, very nervous. Because it means, are the people who are working for the people of Nova Scotia as wise as the people who run the oil companies? Do they know exactly the information is correct? Do they know that formula I was talking about, what the oil companies use and would have to have in order to get the retail price at the pumps that they need to make a profit? And I stress profit because they are very profitable, the oil companies. And is there any way you can tell those things? I say there isn't. This act definitely doesn't do that. I'm very disappointed in the act. It doesn't go far enough. It doesn't help the people in Nova Scotia with the immediate crisis they have in oil. If the government was to take the 2 cents off immediately, they would make it up immediately in the GST, because the price of gas has gone up so much that they get it on there. And I'd like the minister's views on that too. Exactly where does the GST eliminate the 2%? And that's a very important question to ask. And I'd like the minister's answer on that. Again, I'll stress it. This is going to have a negative effect on our economy. The government has taken no other steps for alternate energy, for working with transit systems of any type to do this. It isn't even interested in going to the Public Utilities Board to see what information they can get from the oil companies to give them the information and ammunition they need to move forward. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll conclude my comments.
Thank you. If I recognize the minister, that will conclude debate. Recognize the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, pleased to spend a few moments to encapsulate some of the comments that were said earlier, as well to respond to some of the comments that are made in the media over the past 24 hours with respect to this particular piece of legislation. I want to point out that I was not surprised by the reaction of Big Oil with respect to this bill. However, I am extremely surprised and disappointed at the reaction of the member for Richmond, Clare, and the member for Preston Lakes, at their reaction, because frankly, Nova Scotians and their constituents, I believe, would want them to support legislation that supports them and not oppose legislation that is seen as regressive to the oil industry. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, that explains my disappointment, and I would expect the disappointment of the constituents of Richmond County, of Clare, and of Preston Lakes. I want to as well take a moment to convey to members of this House for the third or possibly fourth time a Liberal task force report that was done for the Federal Liberal Caucus, by the Federal Liberal Caucus in 1998. It studied a number of reports, including a report that was done by the province of New Brunswick that clearly states, and I can't say it anymore, clearly states that a simple reduction in taxes in the province of New Brunswick meant that oil companies consumed all that tax in their margin. The taxpayers had no benefit and lost that revenue to Big Oil. And Mr. Speaker, our government and our party were not prepared to stand by and allow that to happen in Nova Scotia. I am particularly perplexed at the comments by the member from Richmond County, because I recall just 2 days ago in questioning and question period, the member for Richmond County spoke about the roads in Richmond County when the Minister of Transportation conveyed to him about his spouse's comments that the roads there were better than his home. And what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, is that the member from Richmond County speaks on both sides of this issue. He wants government to invest more money in the roads in Richmond County, and then he wants government to take away our tax revenue that it uses to invest in roads. He can't have it both ways, Mr. Speaker. As the member for Clayton Park correctly pointed out, It's impossible to spend money twice. You can't have it both ways. You either reduce the taxes and don't spend the money, or you keep them at the level and you do spend that money to improve the roads in Richmond County and other counties around this province. I can only imagine how disappointed the people of Richmond County are, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make a few comments of the remarks attributed by certain gasoline company executives. And this executive was supposed to have said that if gasoline wholesalers are required to give notice, then others would play the game of monkey see, monkey do, and raise their prices. What a strange thing to say. What a strange thing to say in a market where no matter where you go in Halifax and pretty near across this province, you will find that you will pay the exact same price for fuel in nearly every region of this country, or this province, and nearly every station in this municipality. Was he suggesting that it's purely coincidental in every station in the market, they increase their price at exactly the same time, on exactly the same hour, by exactly the same amount? That's a strange coincidence indeed. He talks of living brain transplants, but how stupid does he think Nova Scotians are? Does he think for a moment that Nova Scotians don't know that play and follow the leader when it comes to gas prices? Does he think that's not the case, Mr. Speaker? When we want consumers to have information and we want them to be able to make an informed decision, that's what this act is about, Mr. Speaker. This act is just the first step in the process. The Select Committee in this House will take on the issue in more detail very quickly. Consumers want relief now. As I said earlier, the Liberal government in New Brunswick tried lowering their gas tax. It failed. The oil companies simply took that money and added it to their profits, Mr. Speaker. I think Nova Scotians would rather have that gas taxes go to build roads and bridges than go to big oil somewhere in North America. Yes, I saw the reaction of gas companies. It did not surprise me, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell you that a number of people have contacted me since we tabled this legislation. And what they said, you must have gotten it right. Because if they're reacting like this, that must mean they're concerned. And if they're concerned about one thing, Mr. Speaker, and that is their bottom line and their profit. Mr. Speaker, our job is to be concerned about Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. And that's what we're doing with this act. These are steps the gas companies don't like. It's pretty clear they don't want consumers to have information. That's what this act is about. It's odd that gas companies executives would call consumers having more information is bizarre. It's pretty clear who's on whose side here, Mr. Speaker, and certainly we're on the side of consumers. The first thing this law will do is stop surprises. Nova Scotians will have 2 clear days of price increases at the pumps. And frankly, Mr. Speaker, I think Nova Scotians will thank this legislature and thank me as the minister to have an opportunity to buy gas cheaper today when they may have to pay 2 or 5 or 7 or 10 cents more tomorrow. This will allow drivers time to adjust to the increase and fill up their tanks before higher prices kick in if they choose to do so. The Act defines 2 business days as not including Saturday, Sunday, or holidays. For example, as I said yesterday, if an oil company filed their notice at 1 p.m. on Friday, they could not take effect until 1 p.m. on Tuesday. It gives consumers plenty of time to make that consumer choice and to spend if they feel it's appropriate. Before deciding on this route, we had looked at a number of options, including the full regulation of gas prices as exists in Newfoundland and Prince Edward Island. And Mr. Speaker, I want to point out as well that we did consult with gas companies, we did consult with retailers, we did consult with consumer groups, and we understand very clearly that we need to consult with Nova Scotians, and that is the reason that we believe that the all-party committee will enable us to move forward in the direction that is supported not by members of this legislature. After all, the support we really need is by Nova Scotians. And when we hear from Nova Scotians and when that committee reports back to this government, we'll be able to make the direction and the changes that are necessary and that are recommended by Nova Scotians. The Newfoundland and PEI experience is that regulation does not necessarily result in lower prices and does not prevent prices from increasing. Their systems do, however, prepare residents for the increases. In PEI, residents know prices can change at the beginning of each month, and in Newfoundland, prices can change the first and the middle of each month. And they are able to make consumer decisions based on that. We are going one step farther than that. We are going to provide them with 48 hours notice of what that change is going to be. Nova Scotians realize that we cannot isolate our province from volatile global oil markets. Mr. Speaker, if I were the minister able to wave a magic wand and say prices are going to drop by 20%, it would be a wonderful thing, but I know in a real world I can't do that. And I know that consumers and taxpayers have asked the federal government to intervene, and they chose not to. And they've asked and demanded the oil companies to intervene and be fair, and they chose not to. Mr. Speaker, this act and that committee is our solution and our response to consumers' requests. We chose to do something about it while others chose to simply criticize and stand back and blame it on others, Mr. Speaker. That's not good enough for Nova Scotians. It's not good enough for me. Record gas prices have been the front page news throughout North America for several weeks. We can, however, take away the sticker shock of sudden and steep increases by providing consumers with timely information. That's what this act is about. The province's retail gas and heating market is supplied by only a handful of wholesalers. These wholesalers are retail outlets that are owned and operated and controlled by them. They will be required to notify my department before increases in gasoline and home heating fuel prices. The member for Fairview correctly pointed out that this bill is not just about gasoline and it's not just about diesel, but it's also about home heating oil. Mr. Speaker, as a government, we are very concerned about the impact the rising price of crude oil and the market conditions around the supply will have on home heating oil. That's why we included that in our terms of reference in the Select Committee. That's why we spoke to that in this piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, because we know government has to act. After all, that's what we're here for. They will provide the notice through our government website that will be established soon. The industry will also be able to lower prices without providing advance notice. Contrary to what the member for Preston has indicated, the industry will be able to lower the price without providing advance notice. Unfortunately, I think the member was reading two separate bills, and there are several bills on the floor of the legislature right now dealing with gas prices and may have been mixed up on that particular point. But they will be required to file that lower notice. After all, Mr. Speaker, we want to ensure that the right thing is done for the right reason, not that we're against lower prices. We want to know why those prices come down so we can provide that information to the Select Committee so they can examine it, and that'll help them as a tool to be able to step forward into the next process, the next part of this process, to protect consumers, protect Nova Scotians from skyrocketing fuel prices. Now, to inform the public, these wholesalers will be required to post these 2 days' notice of the increasing price at their stations so the public will be aware in advance, Mr. Speaker. They'll be able to find that information at their stations where they pump their gas. That'll enable them to make that kind of decision that they need to make. This legislation will also give government the authority to set wholesale and retail levels for fuel prices if down the road it is felt that stronger measures are needed to protect consumers. Mr. Speaker, that speaks to the Select Committee when they bring forward their recommendations. This piece of legislation will enable government to act immediately if it believes the recommendations are warranted, Mr. Speaker. We have also established the all-party committee to investigate gasoline and fuel prices and supply issues, Mr. Speaker, which is an important element in the province and report its finding by August 31st. Mr. Speaker, members had mentioned about the date, August 31st. I would like to see that date sooner than later, but I understand this is a very complex issue because we have been dealing with this for quite some time. Therefore, we need to give the committee the time it needs to do a thorough and thoughtful job, Mr. Speaker. And if it means an extra 31 days to do the right thing, I think the committee needs that 31 days. But if the committee is able to report back sooner, I would encourage them to do that, Mr. Speaker. There's nothing that prevents the committee from reporting back sooner if they feel they've been able to do that. The committee will include a chair and equal representation from all three parties, Mr. Speaker. I believe that all three parties have a part to play in the solution of this complex problem. That's why we have included them and included this committee as a key component of resolving this issue for Nova Scotians. The terms of reference will examine why fuel prices are at the current level, rationale for different prices in different regions of the province, and I am extremely puzzled. I must say I am extremely puzzled that some have said here in this room during debates that they don't think that's a big problem. Well, frankly, I can tell you as the minister responsible, I've received a number of letters from people in a variety of regions in this province about the fact that in one region they pay 5 and 6, 7 cents more. We need to be able to justify that to them and require oil companies to justify to us why that's the case, Mr. Speaker. All MLAs have heard from Nova Scotians about their frustrations driving to work with one price in the gas station and driving home with a higher price. Mr. Speaker, this legislation will enable them to have the information they need to be able to make a decision on the way to work. Do I buy gas now or do I wait later? I know what the price is going to be in 2 days. I know what the price is right now. And they can make that decision that can save them money in their pocketbooks. After all, that's what we're here for. Nova Scotians do not expect us to build a gasoline price firewall around our province. It's unreasonable. It's not what they expect. They do realize that factors that determine the price of barrel oil are far beyond our ability to control and influence, but they want us to protect their interest and to ensure that they're being treated fairly. That's what this piece of legislation is for. That's what it's all about. That's what the committee's for. That's what they're all about, Mr. Speaker. That's what this government stands for. That's what we intend to do. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I'm pleased to move second reading of Bill number 79. Thank you.
The motion is for second reading of Bill number 79. Is the House ready for the question? Would all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye? Aye. Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill 79, title and act respecting the price of petroleum products.
I order that the bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. So recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 64, the Capital Region Transportation Authority Act?
Bill number 64, the Capital Region Transportation Authority Act. Recognize the honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's ironic that the two bills, Bill 79, the Petroleum Product Pricing Act, would come directly before the Transportation Authority Act, because you know, the Bill 79 dealt with gas pricing, and this bill will be dealing with transportation. And it so affects transportation because it would assume that we have to do or deal with more efficient modes of transportation as a result of the pricing of gasoline and so on. But Mr. Speaker, getting to Bill number 64, an act to establish a transportation authority for the capital region. Mr. Speaker, this was an address from the Speech of the Throne in 2003 when the government came back to the Legislative Assembly. And I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I was somewhat disappointed that, in fact, there had been this lack of consultation prior to with respect to the Halifax Regional Municipality. Because I believe that the essence of this bill is a good bill with respect to the Transportation Authority. Mr. Speaker, I want to preface my comments with respect that I am not an expert with respect to transportation. And little do I know about transportation authorities other than when I had the opportunity to go to Boston once to a Boston game. And I recognize that then the modes of transportation and everything was addressed by what was called the Massachusetts Transportation Authority. And while in Boston, Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to see the modes of transportation that were provided by the Transportation Authority. And this was not only for the city of Boston, but it was for the entire state of Massachusetts. and that in fact it dealt with all modes of transportation, be they 100 series highways, be they super highways, be they subways, be they public transit, or be they tolled highways or tolled tunnels. And Mr. Speaker, I remember going through the Sumner Tunnel in Boston, and it had operated by the Massachusetts Transportation Authority. I remember taking the public transit in Boston and then moving from the public transit in Boston down to the subway, all which was managed by the Transportation Authority, the Massachusetts Transportation Authority. This particular authority narrows into what is called the capital region. I don't know if there's a defined boundary with respect to the capital region, or if that means the entire Halifax regional municipality and with respect to its defined boundary. I would assume that the minister, in his nod, is indicating that, yes, this is confined specifically to the electoral boundaries of the Halifax regional municipality. And that, in fact, Mr. Speaker, the other commentary I might say is that it's pleased to see that the mayor of the Halifax regional municipality, Mayor Kelly, must have had some good talk, and he must have had a nice dinner, candlelight evening with, in fact, the Minister of Transportation, because there is within the media today this sort of love-in that they have come together and that they're prepared to talk about this Transportation Authority, and that in fact Mayor Kelly or Petey is on side now with Ronnie, and that they're both able to go out there and talk about this, that there is some sense of mutual agreement with respect to this Transportation Authority. But I want to tell you that if this moves faster than the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities with respect to assessments, and that in fact there is some comprehensive responsibility by this Transportation Authority, then we can all be very pleased. But I certainly hope that the mayor and the provincial government doesn't slow down the process of bringing on this Transportation Authority. But before that happens, Mr. Speaker, it's important to note that there is that within this act, we don't know the composition of what that Transportation Authority will look like, the composition of who will serve on the board, what the board structure will look like. We don't understand the mandate of the board as well. There is no mechanism within the piece of legislation to say what the mandate of this board will be. We do know that it is generalized by saying that this is a Transportation Authority. But we need to have some meat within the legislation that it imposes a power upon the constructive body that in fact it has a mandate to deliver on transportation. And Mr. Speaker, I just want to I want to say, because there's an area in which I'm extremely concerned with, and that's the area in which in fact what is the mandate, or what will be the role of the Transportation Authority in dealing with tolled highways, particularly private tolled highways. Now, we know there has been much talk, Mr. Speaker, with respect to a private developer building a toll highway called the Burnside Connector into Burnside. And we do know it's the responsibility of municipal, provincial, and federal governments to move transportation in this country, province, and in their municipalities. It is not the role of the private sector to do that. When it becomes the role of the private sector, Mr. Speaker, I as a member want to be involved in this, and I'll go out and purchase property where I find there are heavily trafficked or congested areas, go out and set my basket out, give someone the authority to collect the tolls on my behalf, and go away with a bag load of money off of the people of Nova Scotia. I certainly hope that if the Transportation Authority is designed and the composition of that authority comes forward and the mandate of that authority comes forward, that one of their mandates will be with respect to toll roads. Toll roads should never exist in the province of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, under no circumstances. We, as citizens of this province, pay for infrastructure improvement in two ways that I'm sure of, and one is through our real property taxes, and we pay that to our municipality to provide streets, roads, and networks. The other way is through our gasoline tax, and we pay that gasoline tax in order for to have highway improvements and so on and so forth, so that we can move commuters back and forth. We can move the citizens back and forth, and we can also move our goods back and forth at a reasonable price. Those are the kind of things that we have to make sure that as governments we keep a hold on. The very notion of a government allowing a private developer, simply because he or she has land, or the developer has land, within proximity to a highly traffically congested area, and the government's responsibility to make sure that the road was there didn't happen, and to squeeze individuals into thinking that the only way to address their traffic problem is by a tolled highway is absolutely wrong. There's absolutely no question about that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we need to know that if in fact that is one of the mandates of this Transportation Authority. We also need to know if it is the mandate of the Transportation Authority to look at roads, to look at subdivisions that have significant impact upon the road networks as well when we develop subdivisions. What kind of roads there will be onto 100 series highways, what kind of roads there will be onto the national highway, what kind of roads there will be onto to interchanges and so on. We need to know that that's a mandate of the Transportation Authority to address those particular issues. And Mr. Speaker, we need to know what is the mandate of the Transportation Authority with respect to having the authority to deal with high-speed public transportation. I do know that when the former, who is presently now the Mayor, Peter Kelly, was running for city government in the year 2000, when he was running for municipal government, he had indicated and talked a lot about a high-speed rail to reduce the traffic off the Bedford Highway into the center core of the metro area. In his talk, he spoke passionately about having that. Mr. Speaker, that is another role, maybe, of the Capital Transportation Authority. But Mr. Speaker, I will, at this particular moment, ask to adjourn debate and carry it on a future day.
Thank you. Is it agreed? We adjourn debate? It's agreed. I'll recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House do rise to meet again on Monday at the hour of 2 p.m. The House will sit from 2 until 10 p.m. And Mr. Speaker, the order of business will cover several items on the order paper, ranging from third reading through committee of the whole House and second reading, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I move the House now rise.
Motion is that the House adjourn until 2 p.m. on Monday. Is it agreed? Agreed. It's agreed. Would all those in favor signify by saying aye? Aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. House was adjourned until 2 p.m. on Monday.